you're the richest man in everything, in wealth,
Oh,
in
thank you.
health, in wisdom. Just look at you and I want to be like you. Colin is a dear friend of mine, and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate that. Can you share with us, you have built success over decades. What internal belief system allowed you to sustain success?
I think, we are all really made of the same kind of stuff, and we all are more alike than we think we are dissimilar. And, if you just put humans first whenever you're making a decision and try to come from a place of kindness and gentleness rather than from a place of what's in it for me, I think you do better in life, generally speaking.
You see, this is the mindset that I so adore and I love it. How do you become this person going from what is there for me, like you said, and to that person like you are today, like enjoying life and not looking what is there for me?
Generosity that's been extended to myself. There are signposts along the way, regardless of your philosophical bent or your religious practices. Personally, I've tried lots of different ones. I was born into Catholicism, being an Irish Catholic, and I practiced that for many years. I was even an altar boy. And then later in life, I practiced Islam for several years because I like the idea of nothing between myself and God. And then later I transitioned kind of to Buddhism, not in the traditional sense, but more as a kind of a metaphor in my case for what I feel about the world. But I think over the years, it's just kind of had people that I admired, Nelson Mandela being one of them. And he said something profound about coming out of jail. He said, if I come out of jail angry and hateful at the people who treated me like this, I'm still in jail. And that just struck me. I thought, being upset at people, being mad at people or wanting to pay them back, it really doesn't make any sense. And then there are sayings, along the way. In Christianity, you hear things like, to those who much will be given, much will be required. And, it's easier for a rich man to pass through the eye of a needle to enter the kingdom of God. I think these are admonitions. Now, whether you take them literally or not is a personal individual choice. But I think, if you look at all the great writings, there's so many signposts along the way. Another place I look to are great writers, and poetry often inspires me.
Wow, I love Nelson Mandela as well. I don't know how he did it, where coming out of the jail and still being grateful and not being angry.
Yeah, I mean, this is what made him reconciliation commissions together and to teach people to forgive. It's a lesson we could all learn, yeah, and something we should try to take forward in our lives.
I love that. When life tests you, whether in business or personally, what mental framework do you return to?
So when I think about business and things like that, I try to separate that a little bit from my personal life, because normally when I was in business, I was running other people's corporations. You have a responsibility if you're running a corporation to the corporation itself, which is not a human, but an entity. And so you're there to maximize profits. At the same time, if you look around you, you realize that there's people working there and they're human beings. And as somebody who leads a company, you have more direct impact, I think, on their lives than their family or anybody. I mean, at any moment, you are really kind of the center of their world in terms of salary and how they live, etc. So I think you have a responsibility. So I kind of step back from that a little bit, and I try to understand that there's enough to go around for everybody. And so I usually talk the owners of the companies that I was working for into kind of going along with that and, just trying to do some decent things along the way, better insurances, more benefits. I find that if you treat people that way, you'll be much more successful as a company, because really at the end of the day, AI notwithstanding, you're going to be reliant on the people that work for you in the company, and they're really the ones who do all the work. Somebody like me sitting up towards the top of a company thinking all day long or whatever I'm doing has probably not a significant impact on a day-to-day basis as the actual working of the company as the people who are actually doing the work.
Treating people right. I love it. What do you think about AI? What's coming?
It isn't really the AI itself that I think is so important as what it will enable us to build in the future. The things that AI will help us build is probably much more important than the AI itself. You're going to see tremendous transformations in medicines and how things are distributed. Also, of course, like any tool, we have to be cautious about how we deploy apply it because, it's got the potential to be destructive. I mean, you can even see it today. There are people getting stuck in what I would call AI vacuums. They're falling into relationships with it, et cetera, et cetera. So we do need to be careful how we expose children to it. But it's not a panacea. Everybody's running around putting AI in their companies, but most people have no idea how to actually use it with their company setting. I mean, of course, they can check their emails to make sure their spelling's good and all of that, but that's not really the key. I think the agentics piece of it, where we start to build clever agents, it allows us to look at things like protein folding, and you're going to see big advances in medicines as a result of that. And also combining AI with technologies like CRISPR and stuff will help us move forward.
I'm a little bit asking right now about the finances, which I'm just curious. What was the biggest revenue that company you were working for?
The biggest company I ever was involved with was 350 million.
Wow. That tells a lot about you. Okay, next question. At this stage of your life, what does success actually mean to you now versus 30 years ago?
Well, I mean, 30 years ago, so 30 years ago, I'd been in my early 40s. And I think, back then, like most people, you thought, probably displaying your wealth perhaps more than you should. I had a friend who used to joke that there were three kinds of people in the United States. I was working in America at the time, where you have the haves, the have-nots, and those who have not paid for what they have. And so consequently, you tend to try to, the big cars and all of that. And now I'm at a point in my life where, none of that matters. I have a small home in Italy. It's quite beautiful with lots of artwork, but it's small and it's kind of, not really something that would draw the eye. I no longer own a car. I travel a lot, but I take trains and buses because I try to be careful of the planet. I think I just started to think more about, giving back and doing more. I find myself spending a lot more time helping people, advising people without any expense for them, and just kind of realizing, it's more important to kind of give back at the end of the day and help other people. I'm interested in, helping children grow and helping people in other countries. And I like to buy pieces of land, as you know, and give them as gifts to people and, things like that. So I think you just reach a point in your life where you realize you have enough. I have all the cups of coffee I can drink, and there's only so many pairs of jeans I can wear, and so many hamburgers one can have, so really all of that kind of falls away from you as you get older. I think, the pursuit of displaying how much money you have kind of becomes kind of funny, really.
So if you will give one advice to your younger self, is this what will be like? Give more, contribute more? Is that what I hear?
If I were to give advice to my younger self, I would say just be smarter about the choices that I made, the friends that I collected, the people that I was involved with. Often in life when you're younger, you just kind of accept everything on face value. But the friends that you make and the people that you're involved with, particularly in business and stuff, it can really change a lot of the outcomes. They have a lot of impact on you. And when you're young, you don't always really understand that. You fall in love with somebody because they're beautiful or they're handsome or they're smart or whatever they are. The thing about it is, Warren Buffett actually said it very cleverly. He said you should, kind of have people working for you who are very energetic, very smart, and have integrity. But he said, if they don't have the last one, don't get anywhere near them, because the last thing you need is somebody who's smart and energetic around you who has no integrity. And that's always struck me as very true, because in my life I've had people around me who were smart and energetic and lacked integrity, and it always showed up in the end. So I actually always like that saying.
Explain to us, what does it mean, integrity, in your word?
Integrity, well, it really means keeping your word, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I do it. And if I find myself unable to do it, I A, make them aware of it immediately, and B, try to find a B plan to get him somebody who can actually do it. And just kind of keeping your word, acting like a good person, being kind to animals is a good measure of somebody who has integrity. I mean, they may seem kind of simplistic, but at the same time, they kind of tell you a lot.
Have you ever experienced any kind of loss in your life, financial, emotional, anything?
Yeah, I've experienced all of the above. I've had financial setbacks that were pretty significant, where I went from having quite a bit of money to having almost none. When I was very young, I was actually homeless. I lived in my car.
You were homeless?
Yeah, I lived in my car in San Diego for quite a while. Like most immigrants to the United States, it takes a while to get your footing under you. do and to get ahead. Living through the 1970s with the gas crisis and jobs being at a premium, et cetera, one found themselves in dire situations. That's kind of the financial things. And then I've had partners actually cheated me out of quite a bit of money. But, this is a good life lesson. It taught me not to have partners. And then on a personal front, of course, I've had tremendous loss. I've lost almost my entire family. I only have one brother left alive who's older than me, coming from a large Irish Catholic family. They're almost all gone. And, as recently as just a few weeks ago, I had a friend who's quite a bit younger than me, Mr. A.J. Fox, die suddenly in his early 50s. So it's kind of non-ending, but at the end of the day, none of us get out of here alive anyway. So you've got to accept the fact, once you understand that and kind of accept that idea that we are all going to eventually, I don't really call it dying, I call it transformation, because we transform from what we are now back into the balls of energy that we were. And I think given that we're a collection of electrons and atoms, we go back into that same stage and we just join with the great force that makes up the whole cosmos, because that's what the entire cosmos is made of, the same things that we are. We are made of stardust after all.
That's true. So if someone right now is going through something, a loss, either financial, divorce, losing someone, being cheated on, what would you recommend to that person?
I would recommend do not get angry at them. Do not think about paying them back. The best thing is to go on with your life and live it well. That is really the best way to live your life. And then recognize from that lesson that you would never want to do that to anybody yourself, because you now know how it feels to have that done to you. So, instead of turning bitter in anger, I think do what Mandela did and just say, you know what? I can't take that with me into the future. I need to take kindness and gentleness, and I need to be happy. So being angry at people will not make me happy. So moving on.
All right, let's talk about the marriage a little bit. I know you are happily married and your wife is extremely happy wife. And how long you guys been married? What is the secret to your happy marriage?
I think the secret, well, again, this goes back to choosing the right partner, right? I mean, my mom used to say, marry in haste, repent at leisure. There's a lot of truth in that. My mom was a wise woman. If you rush into a marriage, like any partnership, without kind of doing your groundwork, and then later on you find yourself dissatisfied with it, you should ask yourself, should I have took a little more time choosing my partner? And the answer is always going to be yes. I think, choosing the right partner, somebody that you're simpatico with, etc. My wife's a beautiful woman. As you know, she's a medical doctor who was most recently the chief medical officer of a software company. And she's very intelligent and very fun to be around. But we both often talk about the relationship, and no matter what happens, this idea that love is kind of confusing to people. I think sometimes the decision to stay in love with people, I think, is the decision that you make. It's easy to say, well, I'm out of here, I'm getting a divorce when you have an argument or upset or whatever. But at the end of the day, you need to step back and just really think about why you fell in love with that person to begin with. So for me, it's really a decision to love her and to stay with her. And she and I feel exactly the same way. We talk about it. The other thing is try to do things that you both enjoy doing. We're lucky enough that we both like to travel and experience the world. And so we've kind of built the kind of relationship and the kind of life that we wanted.
How long you guys been married and together?
26 years. We've known each other 34 years, I think.
Wow. Have you ever had the hiccups, any disagreements?
Oh, yeah. We have disagreements all the time. Yeah. No, we're married. From little ones to big ones. I mean, there's always disagreements. I mean, nobody goes through life and doesn't have disagreements, at least as far as I can tell. Yeah, we get into spats about all kinds of things. We've had our moments where we both thought, ha, that's crazy. But we just kind of talk them through. And generally we realize at the end of the day that they're storms in a teacup.
How would you describe love in a romantic relationships? What is love to you?
I think love looks gentle and kind and caring and kind of considerate and should be warming. And it's like opening your windows on a spring day and the sun hits your face and you're like, oh, wow. Love should feel a lot like a spring day in sunny California.
How do we know that man really loves me as a woman from a man's perspective?
I think from my perspective, it's their actions. The words are all fascinating, but it's the actions that count. I mean, it's the little things. It's going to sound very old fashioned, but does he stand up when you come in a room? Does he open a door for you? Does he pull a chair out when you're sitting at the table? If you look like you need a cup of coffee, does he get up and get you one? Or is he just waiting on you to do stuff for him? Does he ever say, darling, don't worry about this, I'll do the dishes? I mean, it's the little things at the end of the day. Does he put you first? I mean, this is what you want, right? I mean, love is really a collection of actions. Does he hold you when you're unhappy? Does he try to make your problems somehow better than they were? I mean, really, it's all the little things, telling you how beautiful you are and all of that. Of course, that's important, and sending you flowers and so on and so forth. All of that matters, but consulting you about decisions, right? I mean, I've known so many women who are completely shut out of the processes of their life. They're actually married to quite successful men, but they didn't really have any say in about how they were living. And when you talk to them private, in this case, I'm talking about wives of very wealthy men that I've been lucky enough to know in my life. And often when you talk to them, they're not living the life they wanted to live. They're actually living the life that he built, which is often a fabulous life. But there's still a little part of them, because I've asked them before, and they often kind of go, yeah. One of them actually told me she wanted to be a ballerina. And that as many times as she told her husband that, he never ever even acknowledged it. And I sent her a pair of ballet shoes as a gift that I bought for her and sent to her. And she was so overwhelmed like that and said, if only he had done that for me. And that's kind of sad, right? If you're out there listening, Linda, I still remember you.
She diminished her dreams.
Yeah. She shrunk her dreams down to the situation. And that, I think, is a big mistake for women. Women, I think, are often raised in an environment. You see the vibe, kind of traditional wives and all this stuff. I mean, there's this notion that, the world is divided into the women's jobs and the men's jobs. But in my relationship with my wife, even though we're equal partners, I probably do more of the cooking and cleaning and laundry than my wife does, because honestly, I enjoy it.
Wow. See, you're just a wonderful person and so empathetic, so understanding. I think if we had more men like you in the world.
I don't really think that I'm all that wonderful a person or anything. I think I'm just probably a product of, the environments that I've lived in and grown up with. And I often spend time looking around at things, mistakes people make, and I make little notes to myself. So when I was really young and I was starting out, I asked somebody about how to get ahead, and they said, find people that you admire. This is way before computers. We're talking a really long time ago. Anyway, they said, if you want to know how to dress and stuff, look at people that you admire how they dress and then emulate that. And I said, well, I can't afford those kind of clothes. And they said, no, but you can find knockoffs and look good anyway. We are talking about writing and one thing and another. And he said, when you get a letter from somebody that's a really good letter, copy it and read it several times and learn how it's written. And so what I've done over my life is emulate people that I admire. And I've mentioned Mandela, but he's just one of many people. I've had many other people that I admired in my life who also I could give shout outs to. And so that's kind of what you're seeing with me now is a composite character that's made up of places I've been, society that I've lived in, cultures that I've admired, people that I've admired. And I think that's really how we should be. This idea that you are this rugged individual made up of nothing but whole self.
You travel a lot with your wife. How many countries have you been to?
I don't really know. I mean, we move every 2 or 3 weeks. We're usually somewhere less than a month. So like recently, we've been in Antarctica, and then we went to Argentina, and I'm in Uruguay, and on Thursday we leave for Paraguay, and then 2 weeks later we head to Brazil, and then 3 weeks in Brazil, then we leave and we head to Morocco, and then from Morocco, it's just on and on and on. So we travel about every 3 or 4 weeks, and then of course eventually we make our way back to Italy, and we hunker down in our home for a month to 6 weeks at the most. But even when we're in Italy, for instance, this time.
Okay, so do you still have a place in your passport for stamps or not anymore?
I actually have, so my wife and I actually have, you can get a big passport, a fatter one, a fatter American passport that has a lot more pages than the
Oh,
regular one.
I will say just I know you for the last like how long? 4 years or so. And
Yeah,
I think you have been in the last 4 years to 100 countries.
at least, yeah. Yeah, maybe even
Wow.
more.
More. So that's why I'm asking which countries you haven't been. So probably you definitely have been to more than 150, 160 countries altogether.
I've been to well over 100 countries. I'm not really sure that it's odd because my wife would probably know exactly. One thing you need to know about you should have my wife on and interview her actually. You'd find
Okay.
her really
Okay, let's do
interesting.
that.
We do a lot of walking, so we're big walkers. We've walked the Camino de Santiago 3 times,
Wow.
twice from Portugal and once across El Norte. The most recent one we did was the Northern Pass.
Oh, wow. So you look so energetic and youthful. Tell us, what are you doing? What is your routine? What you do physically to stay so energetic and looking so young?
So most of the exercise that we get is walking. So my walking goal is just 10 miles a day, but we actually often end up doing more than that. And then, I do like push-ups, I do some sit-ups. We try to be careful about the diet so we don't get fat. We tend to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. As you know, I was a vegetarian for a lot of years, so I kind of still gravitate towards that. I have supplemented my vegetarianism with some protein. It's mostly fish, but I eat it kind of sporadically more than sort of. So we use protein shakes. My wife adds collagen to her drinks because she thinks that that's helpful. I don't know whether or not it is, but she thinks it's a good idea. Given that she's a medical doctor, I tend to trust her opinion about things. So
Okay, that's great. I'll need to interview her as well.
if you set up a call with her, she can give you a lot more details on that. And then there's multivitamins and
So, after visiting so many countries, what have you learned about human nature across the cultures?
I have learned that we have much more in common than this disconnects us. I recently spent a month in Bhutan, which is not something everybody ever gets to do for a couple of reasons. One, it's insanely expensive to go there because the visa is over $100 per person per day. You cannot rent a car or be alone. You have to always have somebody with you. Now, my wife and I were invited there by the Thimphu College. She was doing stuff at the college and I did a lecture for them. We got to go there basically and spend a month at the college and they took us around. They are so gracious and so welcoming. It's just an amazing country to be in. But despite the fact that they're living at, 10, 12,000 feet up in the Himalayas, you would think that they have got nothing in common with us, but we are so similar. They love their children. They spend time taking care of them. They worry about climate things. They're anxious about money. They want a better car. They want a better home. They're worried about their children's education. They're worried about their young people going to work in other countries. One of the things they wanted me to talk about during my lecture was how best to help keep their young people at home. I mean, it's always amazing to me that these countries, just how similar we are. Everybody there speaks English because they teach English basically a second language. I mean, but they're computer savvy. They don't have access to everything we have because money being a bit of a struggle. So they have trouble getting investments for their companies, etc. But when you look at them, in a video or something, you think, man, I have got nothing in common with them. Yet I went and stayed in their home in the country, in what they call a country visit. So I spent, 3 or 4 days living in a traditional home in a tiny village up in the Himalayas instead of in the quote unquote big city. And honestly, they have so much in common with us when you just talk to them about being human. I mean, just being people. We are so similar in our needs and desires and hopes and dreams that I'm just always struck by how similar we are, even though we always think of everybody as the other. And that's one of the problems with people is we always want to label them as others. You hear a lot about immigrants and thieves and this and that, but the truth is we're all a lot alike at the end of the day. We all have the same aspiration.
Okay, thank you for your answer. A few more last questions. You collect
Sure.
art, right? Why you like art?
I think because art informs. So when people talk about art, I don't just collect paintings, although I do collect paintings, but I also collect statuary and art things. And I also collect what I suppose people would call manuscripts or books, rare books. And often there's something about having a connection with that, surrounding yourself yourself with beauty. Over the years, I've encouraged people that I've known, and some of them whom you actually know also, because we have friends in common, to actually start doing it. And without pretty much every single one of them have told me that they felt like it improved the quality of their lives. There's something about just being in touch with it. And then there's kind of the funny parts of it for me. I have a drawer. It was owned by a British officer in 1829 who was stationed in India. And I joke with my wife that his wife probably reacted the same way when he brought it home as I did, as in, what are you thinking buying? So there's all kinds of different things. But I think just having the art makes me realize that, this notion that I own this art piece is kind of funny, because really I don't. I'm just the latest person to have possession of it. It doesn't really belong to me. It's kind of part of all of our pieces and all of our history. And hopefully when I pass away, it will all be available to everybody. And that's kind of the reason to collect it. And I think the idea is to leave it without attaching your name to it, because, it just doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the world. Yeah.
That's a wisdom right there, Colin.
Well, I mean, it's like poetry. Poetry often informs my life more than anything else.
What does a rich life consist of?
I guess friends, companions, company. I mean, that's all that's left in the end. I mean, rich for me means enjoying yourself, doing good things, being generous. I get so much pleasure out of generosity. I mean, honestly, just even simple little generous. So my wife and I do a lot of things through Children International, where we help children in India. It's just kind of a hobby. We started when we got married at our wedding. Instead of getting wedding favors, we decided to adopt children in India. Anyway, it doesn't cost very much. It's like $50 a child per month, right? And of course, it transforms their lives because it pays for food, and then we buy them gifts for Christmas and all the festivals and stuff. But every month we get a picture of that child and a little saying from them. And we started looking at them when they're like 4 or 5 years old. And then you get them, see them grow up and become little adults, and they're all out of school with their little boys and now growing their mustache. And the girls are dressed up in these fancy clothes as little women. And it's so satisfying to just think, if I've never done anything else in my life, it would have worth my while being on the planet just for this one thing. I get so much more joy out of that than looking at how much money I made in the stock market. It's amazing to me that that's just so much more satisfying.
Wow, you're such a giver, Colin. I believe you're not rich until you really contribute to the world, to the others, until you start leaving this legacy that others get better in any way, in any shape, any form in life, just because of your generosity.
I think it's similar to the idea that you're not a leader until you've made other leaders, right? I mean, it's similar. I mean,
Right.
being wealthy doesn't do you any good unless you make people around you wealthy by helping them in whatever way you can. And I'm not talking about, giving them money particularly, although that's certainly an option, but I always try to just help people over the years. I mean, I ran into a little man when I was young gentleman when I was working at ELS, and he basically needed some money to get going with his own side gig, and I gave him a loan. It's basically $3,000 or $4,000 with no interest, and he was paying me back over a couple of years or whatever. I forget the exact thing. Enabled him to go out and buy a small piece of equipment, and that has catapulted him to roll all the way to today, where he's got his own company. I mean, everybody thinks you need to do these big things, like you have to have billions of dollars, and you don't really. I mean, of course, my wife and I are wealthy. I'm not going to act stupid about it, but you don't really need to even be wealthy. You can do little things along the way. Everybody can help somebody in some small way. Yeah.
Right there. Thank you, Colin. Last question. If you were to die tomorrow, what would you want to be known for?
Oh, geez, that's a great question. What would I want to be known for? I guess for being nice, being kind. I think I would want to be known for not punishing people who offended or transgressed against me, because I've actually made a point in my life of not doing that. Often when people, whether it's intentional or accidentally or whatever do something that quote unquote offends me or is actually counter to what I would want happening, they often, I suppose, think, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have done that because I know Colin's got a lot of money and maybe there'll be serious consequences. But the truth of the matter is, I actually pride myself on never, ever, ever retaliating against anybody. I remember this Japanese proverb. I don't really, perhaps not a proverb, but it's a story I heard. There was this samurai and he had a master, and this man killed his master, and the samurai decided that it was his job to pursue this man and to kill him. And so he pursued the man, and it took him, I believe the story goes like this, about 10 years to catch up with him, and he finally corners him. I'm kind of shortening the story. Anyway, he finally reaches the man and he overcomes him, and he's about to kill him, and the man spits at him, and he gets really, really angry, and then he puts his sword away and walks away because he knew he couldn't kill him in anger. He had to kill him because of what he had done against his master, not what he had done against him. I always use that kind of as a parable. I think to myself, do I want to be that samurai or not? The answer is yes, because I know if I use my money or my whatever to friends or whatever to do something to somebody in anger, then I would never be that samurai. And I just wouldn't want to live like.
You're such a light and love and wisdom and everything. I think you're in my circle, what I have, you're the richest man in everything, in wealth, in health, in wisdom. Just look at you and I want to be like you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so
so
much.
much for your kindness. I'm glad we're friends.
Thank you so much, Colin. I appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thank you for your friendship.